What's going on, everyone? This is episode number 287 of the Move Now Chiropractor. I'm here with Danny, and we're here with Emily as well. So this is her debut officially on the Move Now Chiropractor, minus the tribute that you guys did for my birthday, which was awesome. Go back and listen to that one if you want to hear about how awesome of a person I am. No, thanks everyone. Made me feel special. All right, with that said, we're going to run the intro. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk about some cool stuff. We're going to interview Emily. If you don't know who she is, you will laugh, I promise. You might cry, and join us soon. Here's what so many chiropractors have been searching for. How can we expand our clinical reach by finally addressing more than just the segmental component with our patients, but at the same time, not feel like we are selling out our chiropractic principles? The reality is our patients count on us to guide them. And when it comes to results, we must also address their posture and their movement. The verdict is out. Patients have spoken, and this is what they want and what they need, focusing on functional movement and corrective exercise. So how do we practice in a way where our community is engaged, excited, and seeking us out because of this comprehensive, results-based approach? That's the goal we've all been searching for, and this podcast will show you how. My name is Dr. Todd Pickman, and welcome to the Move Now Chiropractor. All right, we're getting started now. So the format of today is really that Emily is our special guest. So we're going to interview her and we're going to talk a little bit about what she does in the clinic. And this will be really helpful, not just for chiropractors that listen to this, so they can get maybe a different perspective on your staff, but also this is good for your staff to listen to, so they can get a perspective on our staff. Okay. Yeah. And with that said, we don't have this scripted. We're just rolling with it and seeing what comes about. So I guess we'll just start with this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to work at the clinic and just go from there. So how long have you been working with us?
So I've been with Gonstead for a good year, like over a year and a half. May 2021 was like my first like official start month. And then it just kind of took off from there. I was a CNA working in like nursing facilities. And this is not proud of it, but I was driving while I applied for this job. I found it on Indeed, and I was like, I'm going to give this a try. So I applied. Less than an hour later, Danny messages me on Indeed, and then I had a phone call interview with her less than an hour later while I was on my way to my other job. And then I had to quickly get off the phone, so I was like, I have to go in and start taking care of my patients. And then I had an interview with you the next morning on a Saturday, and I was like, well, this is interesting. I've never had an interview on a Saturday before. You
did. So let's do this. We'll put a timeout in your story. Just fast forward to what is it you do in the clinic right now? So if someone is just watching this for the first couple minutes, to catch their attention, what do you do in the clinic?
So I think my official job title is I'm the main exercise therapist in the clinic. That is like my official job title, but I do a little bit of everything else in the clinic. Where am I supposed to look, by the way?
You can look either one.
Okay. It's like, I don't know where I'm supposed to.
You can look at both. You can share the wealth. You can be like, I'm over here. I'm over here. You can go back and forth.
Just checking. I'm just looking at that one.
That's okay.
In my site.
Yeah.
I'm the main exercise therapist. And then
or you could actually look at us. We can look at each other. We can do that too.
I was like, that's just a little bit easier.
It's kind of like the cameras are like a fly on the wall that are invading on this natural conversation that we just decided to have.
Wall, so just pretend like they're not there.
But yeah, exercise therapist, and then I've just picked up things around the clinic as they've come up. So I started doing a lot more front desk stuff back in May. I do traction every now and then, like when we would go through like our waves where we needed more help with traction, so I picked that up.
So that's initially what you were hired for, was traction?
Yep, I initially was hired for traction. I picked that up pretty quickly, and then the girl in FM, I took over for her because they told me, hey, you have 5 weeks to learn exercise because she's going on vacation. And I was like, okay. And then I fell in love with it from there. So I preferred FM over traction just because there's just a lot more movement, a lot more going on.
Okay, so in a nutshell, you do a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And there's stuff you've tried out doing that we've realized, all right, maybe that's not your strong suit. Thanks for trying, and let's move you on to something else. And It's like, there's no offense to it. It's like, you can't, I would not want to go run front desk.
No.
And I probably wouldn't be very good at it.
It's just, there's like a few things like, are we allowed to say names? Like Jenna? So like Jenna's job, like she's the scribe. She does
New patient coordinator.
Yeah, she's the new patient coordinator. That's probably something that
We are allowed to say names, yes.
Okay, I was just checking. I didn't know if it had to be like secret.
No, it's not secret. So Jenna, which she'll be on a future podcast too, and maybe we'll all get together. I need some more microphones.
We need only like 3 more.
Well, we could have 4 on here at a time.
Perfect. That'd be good for like having both of us.
Or everyone could be here and they could share microphones.
That would work.
You know?
Hey, you never know.
Okay, so Jenna does new patient coordinator stuff, and what?
Yeah, I think I gave that a try for a minute, but it's definitely not my strong suit, and I'm okay with that. So
yeah,
I just kind of backed off and let her do it. The last thing that I've like really starting to take on that we're gonna slowly work our way is X-ray training.
And side note, Emily even helped teach at our last Impact event. Mm-hmm. So she was there teaching other chiropractors and their staff, and broke off with some of them, even like another physical therapist, and worked with them and really just shared systems and protocols. And they were all very impressed with Emily, and she does so with a fun, dry sense of humor that keeps you going, which I'm sure some of that will come out today. We'll see. So, okay. So now that's what you do. So everyone, I think from a standpoint of why you want to pay attention is because Emily started off, and truth be told, for the sake of transparency, we're going to talk about some of the ups and downs a little bit, because she's been one of the few that we've had that come in that have any sort of ups and downs and then hang in there and really, I think, evolve as a person and find a great purpose in being part of the team and working with us. And it's so obvious with you that like from my standpoint, I can speak for myself. I know I've talked about this with Danny before. Like it's rewarding for us to see how you've evolved. It's fun, and it gives us purpose to be like, man, she could have gone and worked at any place where she didn't really have the same connections or didn't have the same like breakthroughs. Because I feel like there's been breakthroughs you've had as a person.
Oh, quite a few. Probably within the first 6 months, I had like my first like big breakthrough, because I could just like feel myself like I was hitting that like my wall where I was like, this is usually about the time that I start looking for a new job, and this was like November.
As what, just every 6 months?
Yeah, well, because then I get bored. Like with the way that like my brain works, if I'm not being challenged at work, then I'm gonna go look for somewhere else that is going to challenge me. And so instead of talking, with Danny about that, I was starting to let it affect my attitude, and so I was starting to bring everyone else down in the clinic. And so then you guys gave me a couple days off. And that's when I like really sat and I was like, oh, okay, I actually really do like this job. Like I'm just being kind of a pain right now.
So share some of your guys' interactions, Danny, since we got you mic'd up as well.
Okay. Just to touch on your come to Jesus moment that we had a couple months after you started. Obviously you love your job, you love what you do, but it was starting to spill over. Your mood was affecting the entire office.
Yep.
So I was nervous pulling you into the office because we hadn't had a conversation like that before, but I had a very stern, like mother-daughter type of conversation with you. And you took it very well, and you opened up and you were like, yeah, I know, I understand, I've got some things going on. So we let you go so you can clear your head, and you came back a better person. And I think from there, our relationship got better because you could trust me with things, and then I knew that I could have those conversations with you and you wouldn't be upset. You take constructive criticism very well, the best that I think anybody's ever taken constructive criticism. You grow from it, you ask a lot of questions, and when you're starting to get to that point where you're gonna hit a wall, you come, you talk to me, you're like, all right, we gotta do something. So then we sit down together, we figure it out, and then we move forward.
So my thought is there anything that you could pull from the top of your head as far as like what maybe one of the, I don't know, just most enjoyable things in the clinic, or the biggest like epiphany that you've had, like the biggest breakthrough where you're like, I really like, excuse me, frog in my throat. I really like being here. I really like this aspect. This really makes me feel like this, and I like that. Is there something you can share for yourself just in the time that you've worked in the clinic? What are things that make you feel like it's not just a job, but it's really enjoyable?
I think my favorite thing is getting to know the patients, because once, after their first like couple visits, in the beginning it's just like, oh, hi, like we're here. And then like you get them back at FM And that's when, I really start, and then you get them in traction. It's like they're stuck there for 20 minutes. So you have to talk to them. And so they open up to you, you open up to them. And so you just build this like friendship with all these patients around you. And it just makes coming into work so enjoyable. And then like you get along with, most of the time I get along with most of the coworkers.
Yeah, I think
Poor Danny's like, oh crap. I'm just kidding. I get along with everyone.
Yeah, I think especially now with our current lineup who we have, I mean, I think everyone there, good solid workers. So it's hard not to get along with everyone when we all share that thing in common.
Oh yeah, some people don't realize like how close we can get with each other because we are such a small clinic that like we're going to know a little bit about everyone and if we don't, like if you're really timid and quiet, we're going to open you up one way or another. Like I'm starting to kind of break the ice with Paul a little bit with that. Like he was very like shy and timid when he came in, and now like I can get him to like joke around with me, and it's just because I have a very interesting sense of humor that he finds funny. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. On a daily basis, I'll ask Paul how he's doing. Hey, Paul, how's it going? All right. Okay.
Yeah.
and I say, Paul, what is it going to take for you to say, fantastic, I'm doing great? And he just looks at me, he's like, just kind of half
he
smiles.
just kind of nods at you.
All right. Well, what do you think you would share with a chiropractor out there who has, I don't know, who has staff that he's struggling with, like struggling to keep staff? I mean, from your standpoint, from a non-managing staff point, which is Danny, but from your perspective, what do you think it is that gets someone to stay on and get someone to maybe look for another job and move on?
If you were to take the time to pull your employees aside, like you have done in the past, where you've pulled us aside each week and you just talk to us like a normal human being instead of like a boss to employee, it was like, okay, walls down, what's going on? Like, is there anything that we need to change? When you did that kind of changed a lot because I was just like, oh, okay, like he actually cares. Like you care about us, but I think some people are afraid to open up a little bit more to their bosses because they're like worried that something's going to happen. And so when you sat down with us and you just kind of brought down that wall with it, it worked wonders. I was just like, oh, okay, I can joke around with him and I can, like, he's just a big giant teddy bear. So it made our relationship way better because I felt like I could like talk to you about other things and like I didn't have to go to Danny with every, like, I'm like, Danny, what do I do? She's like, just talk to him. I'm like, oh, okay. And so when I started doing that, I was like, oh, this is a lot easier than I thought. I was just making it, I work harder, not smarter sometimes.
Yeah. And just to give you a reference of like what a small or big clinic is. I mean, technically in the chiropractic space, our staffing situation is above average.
Yeah. Oh, was it really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most chiropractors out there on average, you'd probably say maybe have 2 staff.
Maybe, yeah.
Or maybe 3 at most. So the fact that we have, I mean, there's what, 6 of us?
Almost 8.
Almost 8.
Is it really?
Yeah. I mean, Danny, Emily, me, Dr. Zebra,
Jenna.
Courtney, Jenna, Paul, and then Caitlin's going to be new. So that's 8. So 8 minus the doctors, 6.
Dang.
That's like unheard of.
Yeah.
I was to say, when I started, there was I think there was like 11 of us total. When
I think at one point we were up to like 11.
That's when things were, me personally think that they were the most dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I've noticed that like the more staff you have, the more dysfunctional it is because then you have like your cliques and that there's always like the few that will like sit in the back or
It was like
they're
100
just like little
pennies versus 4 quarters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's just a lot harder. I feel like to get like you couldn't get to know everyone with that big of a like that many people because even then it was like if we wanted to come talk to you, it's just feel like you had a lot like 10 other people to deal with. We're like, oh, I don't want to bother her with those. And I think that's in the beginning that was my downfall was I didn't come to you before for a lot of things because we probably could have avoided me getting to the point that I did for the first 6 months.
But I'm glad you did because that's what helped us build our foundation.
Yeah.
So.
Because like we hadn't had much interaction until then, but it sucks that it took it to that point. But I'm glad because I mean we're here a year later and I'm I nanny for you. I come over to your house like once or twice a week. I hang out with you all the time. So, and I'm always on like some sort of either texting you or like calling you. So like I've never had a manager or a boss that I could do that with, where I could just like text them out of the blue, or they'll just text me about random things. So that's another thing that really kept me, because like you're never really going to find another place like that. And so I got comfortable here. I'm like, I can trust them with anything. Like they're not going to do, like, I'm not going to get retaliated for if I have to like go say something.
It's like family.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
there's going to be stuff that happens, and it's just how you deal with it.
exactly.
You know, it's all of us are adults. All of us want the same thing. And it's kind of like how I break it down with even patients. You know, patients come in, they have a problem. They want a solution to their problem. Sometimes they don't understand that the solution is going to take some work. It's going to take some dedication, some time investment, financial investment, all of that sort of thing. And so we have to help them see that this is what is going to get you what you want. From a staff team standpoint, what do you want? Well, you need income, but what you want is something that gives you purpose, that you enjoy, that you have fun with, that you grow as an individual, that you're around other people, that you enjoy their company. You know, and if you can have that, I mean, at the end of the day, life is short. If you go through and you hate your job, you hate what you do every day, like you get one shot living in this body on this planet. Like, why would you waste that doing something you don't like to do? And so many people are stuck in jobs like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was stuck in a job like that for the longest time, but that was just because I dealt with it, because I was making, you know, sometimes I overlook like my happiness for money. So I would, when I was 18, 19, I'm like, oh, I'm making great money, but even though I hate my job, I don't like, it's not a big priority for me.
Yeah.
And so I changed that, and I was like, I don't need to make, $25 an hour. I don't care. I just want somewhere that's stable and that I can enjoy myself at, and not like have to search for a job every 6 months.
And sometimes it takes going through those experiences so you have a reference point, so you can see what you like. You know, like that whole saying, the grass is always greener type deal.
Not always true.
Yeah. I mean, like our last couple of people that left the clinic that really weren't the best fit for the clinic, and they left, and it was probably good that they left, because it would have probably not been on their terms if they had stayed much longer, meaning we would say, we invite you to leave. But they left. And, in two of these instances that I'm thinking of, not to get through the details, but we then get paperwork that they basically got a job somewhere else, and then the job didn't work out because they filed for unemployment. So then Danny and I are like, oh, so you left here for another job, but then that job didn't work out in a matter of a couple of months. Maybe the grass wasn't greener. And I can't help but think sometimes these people are like, oh man, I should have made it work, or I should have kept this thing that is pretty unique and rare to have in the workforce, is like a small family business where everyone communicates. I think we have a high level of communication because we teach communication. So
we preach it, and I think we've gotten better over time. We've gotten way better with each other, because like in the beginning it was just like communication. We're like, okay, but we didn't know how to communicate with each other, because we're
the same way that we teach how to communicate with patients, right?
And so we've gotten so much better about with like if we're getting irritated with each other, I'm just like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, we need to talk this out before it gets any bigger. And so once we squash it right then and there, it's like clean slate. We just move it past. And so it really, we're really good. Yeah.
Something too, I wanted to circle back to, just like Jen Psaki, the old press secretary for Biden, is, circle back, right? She always said she'd circle back and then ask a question and she didn't know the answer, or she didn't want to answer it. I'm going to circle back to you on that one. So to circle back, something that you had said though, is that the more staff you have, the more problems, more money, more problems type thing. Mm-hmm. Not always if you compare it to having two staff. So like if you have too little staff, then your issue is people running around with a chicken with their head cut off, and they can never scale or grow what they're doing in practice. So in our model of chiropractic, which is all Emily, Danny's in a different situation. So she's been in multiple chiropractic clinics and she works with all these different chiropractors. So she knows the wide variety of how different chiropractors practice. All is like chiropractic is you do specific adjusting, you do spine remodeling traction, you do functional movement, you do movement assessments, you do re-exams, you take comparative x-rays.
Yep.
Like you do wellness scores, you have like goals that you set with the patient, you have home care. Like, you're just like, yeah, why would you practice any other way?
That's exactly my mindset. I'm just like, well, there's like every time I pass by the joint or I see like an ad because, you know, I'm on TikTok like a usual Gen Z, if that's what I'm called. I'm on, you know, the joint always has these like advertisements and I just give them the middle finger every time. I'm like, nope.
Jeez.
I'm like, why are you in business right now? Or they're like, no, I'm not nice. I don't care.
My goodness.
Like we went to Costco over here and my boyfriend pointed out, he's like, there's the joint. I'm like, yeah, I said some not so nice words, but besides the point, I got to keep it PG.
Yeah. So it's that your reference point is a totally different level of chiropractic than what most chiropractors are doing. And a lot of our audience that listens to this podcast or watch these videos, they're interested in our systems. They're interested in a more in-depth clinical approach for patients. They want better outcomes, but their fear is, how am I going to train my staff? How many staff do I have to have? How much is it going to cost for payroll? I don't have enough space in the clinic. It sounds like I need a 20,000 square foot clinic to do this. Like, how am I going to have time to implement this? Patients aren't going to want this. Staff's going to get too stressed out and they can't handle it. We need to keep it super simple. Like, those are the things that chiropractors out there fear and think about when they hear about our model without knowing all the details and all the systems put in place.
Yeah. That's why I like the Impact Seminar. Like this year I was like more hands-on with it because I think the first time that you guys had one was like right after I started. And so I was just kind of like, I was just watching but then this year you were like, hey, you want to help? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so it was really cool to like pull, like the physical therapist and the other exercise therapists pulled me aside and were wanting to know like the different systems and what we use back in FM. And so it was really cool to feel needed in a certain way or like wanted because they wanted to pick my brain with everything. And I was like, I'll show you everything I got.
Yeah. Well, and also on that note too, they're asking you questions and all you're doing is you're rattling off what you do on a daily basis. And they're like, oh my gosh, tell me more. And you're like, okay. And then we do this. Oh my gosh, tell me more about
so
that.
Excited. And it's,
you know,
I'm just like, okay, this is like a 10-hour day. This is hour 4 that I do. Like it's nothing new to me, but it's like so exciting to them. So I like hype them up. I was like, yeah, this is.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting to them because even though you've learned it a certain way, the version you learned was 20 iterations later after we failed 19 times before that and figured out all the kinks. And so like when we like the stuff we do now is the product that we know works most smoothly.
Yeah.
And there might be a version 21 or 22 in the future as we further tweak. And it might be something you bring to the table to be like, you know, I've done it like this and I feel like we can tweak it a little bit and it'll be better. And we'll be like, great, bring it on. Let's change it.
Yeah.
You know, it's constantly evolving. It's not like we have to stay like this forever. However, it's a very different than what most other chiropractors are doing. So how about we switch topics? I'll let Danny come up with this. Danny, what do you think a common fear or objection, it might be one of the things I just listed, but a common fear or objection that chiropractors have, or maybe something that needs to be clarified in what we do that you could share and then Emily can speak to as far as like her perspective on it?
So a common objection or fear with chiropractors, I mean, space, staffing. How are we going to train? How am I going to learn all this? How am I going to learn this and then train my staff?
How about training wise then? Talk about the training thing and then go through a line of questioning with Emily. Let's see where this goes as far as how she got trained, how she learned, and then maybe even like we can reflect and point out like how much you know right now without really having a big background in exercise. So that's a common one. You know, people are like, oh my gosh, does my person have to be like a kinesiology major and work as a personal trainer for 10 years?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had no background coming into this job. Like certified nursing assistant. That's all I had. I had maybe a little bit of experience in like kinesiology, but that was from high school. And so not going to lie to you, I'm not the greatest in school. I didn't really pass. Anatomy wasn't my strongest subject. But when I started learning this stuff, anatomy made way more sense because like now I was actually doing stuff with it to make it make more sense. And that's just how my brain functions. Like you can't just give me a book and be like, here, learn all the 18 muscles or whatever muscles that we need to work with and teach me an exercise. No, I can't do that. Like you have to show, it's a monkey see, monkey do.
So think back to when you first came into the clinic. Whoa, I hit the spring. I don't know if you heard that. It was like high pitched noise. When you first came into the clinic, when you first started with us, you started in traction, right?
Yep.
Okay. Which we're kind of figuring out, I think, is like a good starting point for people. Start in traction. So for those of you chiropractors out there that are not doing corrective care in office traction, this might not apply to you, but we do chiropractic biophysics. We have spine remodeling traction. And even though there's a lot of specifics to it, it's a good place for people to start and get familiar with anatomy and understand the systems and the setup. So how long were you in traction before you ventured into exercise?
I think a good 2 or 3 weeks. And then
So it was quickly you went to exercise.
It was quick because I started in May. I think by the end of May, we had brought up the idea of me going back to exercise. Danny was like, how would you feel? And I was like, cool, let's do it. And then slowly in between, days and shifts, I would train back and exercise with our 2 other exercise therapists.
So David was back there at the time?
David and Audrey at the time.
And
David
Audrey
was getting ready to leave. Like he had, probably 3 more weeks of his half days in there. And then right after that, Audrey was going to go to Spain. So it was kind of like.
Yeah, it was a pretty quick. And I mean, I picked it up. It was just like, because I've never learned, it was the fact that I had to learn how to teach someone how to do an exercise. And so I'd never done that before. So it was like me learning the exercise and then David explaining to me kind of the background of like, here's why we teach this exercise and here's why we do it. And here's how you show it to them. And here's all like the different modifications. So that stuff I picked up on pretty quickly. The movement assessments that we do took me a little bit just because there's so many things we look for, but now they're one of my favorite things to do in the clinic.
You guys trained on a weekend too, privately, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. The biggest thing that was still catching me off guard was postural correctives, how to teach those and why we do them. So we came in on a Sunday. You volunteered to do a Saturday with me, and so I think we recorded it. It was like an hour long.
Yeah, and it's something we actually put on our YouTube channel. It's on it's on our patient YouTube channel. So it's on Gonstead Spine and Wellness. So for those in the audience that want to try to find it, go to Gonstead Spine and Wellness, and you'll go back and there is a picture of me and Emily. We're going. It was called like postural corrective exercises done right or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know if that rings a bell.
Which is funny that we bring that up because after the impact seminar, probably a month later, one of the girls that I was talking with was asking me about those. So I rerouted her to our YouTube. I was like, we've done a video on this. Like, go reference this video. And so I sent it to her and she was like, thank you so much. That was so helpful. I'm like, yeah, it was to me at the time too, because once we did that, that was just kind of like the last little piece to the puzzle that I needed. And then everything, I mean, it went smoothly while she was gone because everything just made sense finally.
Yeah.
I just needed that last little piece to click.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing about doing video is that video it's evergreen. You can use it over and over and over again. So part of the reason we're doing these podcasts is we're going to cover some topics that we'll be able to reference to other chiropractors when they have a question. They'll say, hey, so how do you train someone up? We'll be like, watch episode 2, whatever, where Emily was on with us. So then maybe go through to your recollection. If you could like give it like, here's how long it took me to get comfortable with this. Here's how long it took you to get to the point where you were the lead in exercise.
Yeah. So the way that I asked to be trained was that you break it down into categories. So we focused on like the timing. So like how we track all of our timings for like insurance purposes and the units. So we focused on that and how they got their numbers. So took me a couple days to figure that out till David and Audrey would let me write it on the card. They just say, look at the time. Here's how you divide the numbers. And then you write it on the card, like in the specific area. And so it took me a couple days to pick that up. And then the longest one took me, the prepping the board was because there's like a certain way that you have to prep the board and you want to stay within like whatever dysfunction that they're working on. Cause there is a protocol that we follow. And so each patient's so different. So you have to know which part of the protocol that they're sitting in right now.
So side note real quick, explain for the audience what prepping the board is. What's the board? What's the purpose of it? How does it benefit anyone? And while you say that, I'm going to stand around and just go make sure that our camera is still going. So go ahead and start.
So we have a big whiteboard back in our functional movement department that we have split up into 20 different slots. We have 10 on the right, 10 on the left. And so each day when I come into shift, I will look at the schedule. I'll pull a list of all my patients that are scheduled appropriately the way that they should be. And so I know by the way that I was learned and by the way that I was taught that I know which patients are going to be coming back to see me, which 95% of them do see me. And so I look at the schedule and then I start putting names up on my board. So I'll write, their first name, what they're doing that day with me. So warm-ups, postural correctives, and if they're doing a functional movement.
It's a big whiteboard.
Big giant whiteboard that I think it's like I think it's like either two big giant whiteboards put together or four smaller ones.
Big whiteboards where you list out your patients for that day and what specific things that they're working on, so that way you can see it at a glance.
Exactly. And then it makes life for the patient easy, so they know, so that way when they come back and exercise, they can look up at the board, find their name, and they already know what they're doing for that day. And so, I show them the new exercises that we do, so that way they can reference it, and that way if they want to take pictures of what they did so they can go practice at home, they can.
Yeah.
So then, because it's dry erase, once they're out of sight, out of mind, I erase the board, chart it, call it a day.
Yep. So before shift, you
Always
find out
before
what
shift.
patients are coming in. Prepping the board is that whiteboard, writing the names of the patients that are coming in. Everybody has a little square. And write down patient name, what they're doing that day, any pertinent information to if they're learning something new, anything like that.
Yep.
Cool.
That's the biggest thing that I like, that it's helpful for the patients. So that way, they're not just high and dry and they're like, sometimes they'll come into my department and they'll be like, I can't see my name on the board. I'm like, I have to write it on the board. Give me 5 seconds because, we'll have, 35 patients do functional movement. I only have 20 spaces. So I erase them and I just add them to my board. And sometimes, I get busy, so I erase them all at once. But most of the time I have a general idea of kind of what my patients are doing because I work with them so closely. So and I keep an eye on them. So I know if we're having problems with squats, we're going to keep working on that. So and they always know when they come back into my department to always start with warm-ups and postural correctives because that's how we get the day going. And then we get into the nitty-gritty stuff.
So how do you translate that over when we have additional staff members back in FM? Even though you're the lead for exercise and functional movement, you know everyone so well, you know your system so well. How do you transfer that information to somebody who is secondary to exercise and functional movement?
So one of the things that I've been trying to do, especially with the exercise therapist that I'm working with now, because he jumps back and forth between traction and functional movement, is that with a new patient that he really hasn't worked with, I'll keep in mind. And so I'll kind of give him a background of what we're doing with that patient. Here's the issues that we're having. And so then I'll get his insight of what he thinks, but I'll let him know beforehand, if I have to leave him alone with the patient, then he knows kind of which route to go. And so we go through, me and him have our own little pre-shift huddle where I'm just okay, I'm going to really need help back here during this time. If you want to do this, I'll conquer that. And so me and him kind of get our own little game plan. And most of the time he can already look up at the whiteboard or look at the schedule and kind of already guess what's going to go down. And so he'll be one step ahead of me. And that was something that he picked up on pretty quickly that I haven't, worked with anyone in the past before, being able to do that. Of just yep, already know, we're going to do it. Or I just give him a look and I'm I need your help back here. And he'll jump back and start teaching exercises.
So just to also give you some reference to what other chiropractors struggle with or what they try to imagine how to get this going in their clinic, something that's just normal everyday procedure for us is if you think about the structure of how a patient comes in for their exercise visit, there's plenty to do for their visit. It's mapped out from top to bottom because those systems, it starts off, the first thing a patient does when they come back there is do what?
Warm-ups.
Okay. So how many different options are there for warm-ups?
3.
And what are they called?
Sequence 1, 2, and 3.
Right. So sequence 1 is for
neck. Sequence 2 is for your neck and your mid-back. And then sequence 3 is all hips and low back.
Yep. Okay. So there's a warm-up process. So patients, take us through that for those that have never seen our exercise department? Like when a patient comes back, what's their experience? Like what's their visual, what's their physical stuff? Where are they going? What are they doing?
So when they come back into my department, if it's the first time that they're ever going to be doing exercises in my area, I always have some sort of rec card, or I have some, like, you'll let me know in chat, like, hey, they're doing sequence 2. Like, they're not just going to come back and we're going to like stare at each other because I have no idea what I'm doing. I always look at their rec card, and the first thing I look at is their traction setup.
So what's a rec card?
It's a recommendation card. So it's something that you guys build on a day 3 with the patient, or it's a day in between day 2 and day 3 after you get like the confirmation from the prof, like, yeah, I want to commit to care. Mm-hmm. Then you and Jenna sit down and you build a rec card based off what the x-rays and the movement assessment look like. And so then that gets translated back to me and traction. So that way, when I pick up the rec card, I can read and know exactly what we're doing for that day.
Gotcha. And so the first time they meet you is technically day
2 during the movement assessment.
Okay, true. So the first time that they start all their exercises, yeah, touche. So the first time, day 2 actually. So the first time that they go through like a full EAT plus FM visit, exercise adjustment tractions, EAT plus FM is functional movement. First time they do that, that's
like day 5 or 6. Usually day 4 is like we're just introducing everything to them.
Cool. So back it up to day 4 then. So day 4 is the first time that they're actually going to start doing more than just a movement assessment.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so on day 4, they're getting introduced to stuff. They're getting their home care. They're kind of being shown the ropes of like, this is what you're going to do. This is what the next 12 weeks is going to look like.
Yep.
Right. They also get a really important resource that they can reference at home and dive into with a full exercise library. That's called
the 12-week transformation journal.
Yeah, the journal, and then they also get
all their home care supplies.
I
was like, what are you
right
trying to do? We give them a login to the website, which has videos that goes week by week, and I make it very known to patients. I'm like, this is something that you will want to watch because we cover this every time you're back here. And then the biggest thing that I reference on the website is our exercise library. So I tell them when I'm explaining the journal, I'm like, everything that I give you on your board is going to be on the website for you to look at and for you to watch. Dr. Todd has made all these videos. So that way, like if we do an exercise, if we do deadlifts in the clinic and I give you homework, I want you to go home and practice these, and you get home and you're like, oh, I forgot how to do them. You can look on the website. Mm-hmm. Because I give most of my patients homework, especially like the young ones, like when they're parents. If we're just not really, there's something that we're missing, I tell them, here's your homework for the day. By your next visit, I want you to come back and I want you to show me a solid deadlift. And that's exactly what happened actually today. I had one of my patients, I gave him homework last time. He's like 12 years old, and he came back and I was able, like, he did a deadlift for me. And
so you practiced it on the video?
Yeah, he practiced it. He's like, see, I told you I could do it. I was like, you did, you just needed some practice.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah. So the thing that Emily's referring to as far as the 12-week transformation, again, if the audience has never heard of this is your first time finding us, or you've heard it before and you want some clarification, it's a program we built on a membership site. So patients get a username and a password. They log into like a website, and there's videos and content in a sequential order. So week 1, they have content that is made available to them. Week 2 content only becomes available after they've been opted in for 7 days after a week. So now week 2 opens, and then week 3 and so forth, all the way to 12 weeks. That's why it's called the 12-week transformation. And then there's a full exercise library that they have access to throughout the entire thing that Emily was referring to, that the way that we structure this with a patient, just to kind of give you a brief overview for those of you listening to this and wondering, how do we program out exercises? How do the doctors communicate to the staff and we all speak the same language? One, we created our own language. So we have a language that we all learned, we created it, and it makes it really quick for us to be able to tell you, here's what I want you to do for the next 15 minutes with the patient, or here's what I want their 45-minute visit to consist of. Yeah. Like we can map that out in like 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm. You just say a few words and I'm like, I know exactly what we're doing today.
Yep.
Like work on D2. Okay. I know exactly what we can do.
Yep. D2, which is thoracic. So D is dysfunction. I'll just kind of start it from here. Day 2, not D2, but day 2, we do a movement assessment. The movement assessment, which we created, it's a extrapolation of the functional movement screen and the selective functional movement assessment. Both of those things take way too long, and I think are just way too hard to apply to what we're doing in a chiropractic clinic. So we built our own movement assessment. We borrowed stuff from there. We added some stuff. We removed some stuff. We call it the Move All 3. So we do Move All 3. Takes about, how long would you say?
15, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
Sometimes, like, if someone's coming in, I don't want to say super functional because not everyone's going to be tip-top shape. Sometimes I can get it down to 12 if they're not really communicating with me, or like they're pretty well, I don't know how to put it in like
they're pretty athletic or coordinated.
Yeah, if they're pretty
Okay.
coordinated that way, it can take me 12 minutes. But if, like a lot of our like auto accidents, I can take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes because I want to make sure that, we're hitting.
It's all dialed in.
Yeah.
Everything's recorded properly. Yeah.
Yep.
So on average, like I'll tell a patient 12 to 15 minutes. I guess some can take 20. I didn't even realize it takes 20 for some people, but
For some people.
I assume it could, especially if they're super dysfunctional everywhere, because
Yep.
you get a lot more stuff to break out. So anyway, they go through a movement assessment. They record all that information. They do that. Patient sees us as the chiropractor for the adjustment end of things. We then get a movement assessment score sheet. Okay. Just a Move All 3. What do we call it? I don't know. Is there a special name for it? I'm drawing a blank of the actual scoring sheet that you use to go through the assessment.
It's just level 1 and level 2 assessment that
Okay.
you guys get.
All right. We just call it level 1, level 2. So anyway, that's filled out. That's given to us. And then us as the doctor, in my case, I have Jenna as my assistant. Dr. Zach does the solo, and we map out the care recommendations using a rec card. You heard Emily talk about this earlier, the rec card. We then hand the rec card off actually to Danny. Danny then builds the financial based on that. And Jenna, my assistant, she maps out the wellness score, which is inside of Cash Practice, both these things, the care plan calculator for the financial, wellness score, the care plan calculator. We have a couple different pieces we put together. We'll cover that elsewhere. And then we do our appointments virtually for day 2 and 3. That's kind of a new thing. We've done multiple conversations on that. We have a whole program that Danny and I are finishing up right now to put out on like all the step-by-step of how to do virtual appointments, because it's huge. I don't do any X-ray review in person. I don't do any care plan recommendations, financial stuff in person. That's all done through Zoom here in my home office that Emily's seen for the first time. She sees now where it actually goes on.
Yep.
And so anyway, then that recommendation card is not just used for Danny to build the financial stuff, but then clinically it goes on to Emily, it goes on to attraction department, so that the rest of the staff can look at that to see what to be able to carry out with the patient.
Yep.
Right. Then now a patient has their next 12 weeks of care mapped out. And the 12 weeks is going to be the stuff they do in the exercise department. In our case, because we do spine remodeling traction, what they do in traction, their home care, their checkpoints of when they check in, or they get a repeat a movement assessment in 4 weeks because they're super acute and everything was bad on day 2. So we need to look at it again. Or do we repeat it halfway into their care at 6 weeks? And then right before 12 weeks, before we take a comparative x-ray, do we also take a movement assessment there? In most cases we do.
Yeah.
What's their home care? We map out their home care. We show it to them. Any manual therapy techniques we're going to do. What else? I mean, that's pretty much encompassed. Oh, and now because we have the treadmill set up too.
Oh yeah, we're gonna start incorporating like a treadmill part to the rec card, so that way, I think it's might just end up going down like the notes section.
Well, because like currently, because I've been mapping out a lot of treadmill setups lately. I think Jenna just writes it in by hand on the
Yeah,
rec card.
she does.
And so for those of you two that haven't heard or seen what this is, it's from Stroops. It's pretty awesome. It's a self-propelled treadmill, so it's not like motorized, but the patient actually has to walk to move it. So that's not a new thing. But what's new about it is that there's a 3-dimensional frame that's built around it that we bolted into the concrete floor in this other room. And then there's a variety of straps and various pulls and things you can do on a patient while they stand on there. So if someone's got a right thoracic translation or they're listed over to the right, we can pull them further to the right, and that signals them to then resist that and pull back to neutral. And now they're walking and they're essentially correcting their posture while they're reprogramming the motor control aspect in their brain of where the body should be with movement. Or someone's got a upper cross syndrome, or big flexed thoracic spine, forward head translation, rounded shoulders. We can reverse that, make them have to retract their shoulders and stand upright and get tall and walk, and reprogram their brain. That's another part of what they're doing on a visit. So in a nutshell, that's what they do. That's the process of what we map out. Now, the thing that I think is really cool and compelling to chiropractors out there is like Emily is someone that came in, did not have any exercise background. She learned all this stuff, and she runs that whole department. She can run circles around, I think, most exercise people out there because she knows how to juggle with different patients, how to keep them occupied, how to progress people so they're not doing the same exercise every single visit. That's baked into our system. We don't do that. We progress them. She knows how to progress them. Mm-hmm. We have a tracking system of making it easy so that the patient also knows that they're doing something different. They look at the board.
Yep.
And they see on the board, oh, today there's new exercise on there. What am I doing today? Mm-hmm. And you're like, glad you asked. Let me show you. Yeah. Right?
That's exactly what happens.
Right.
They're like, what's that? And I'm like, sit down. Let me tell you a story.
You're like, how much time you got, buddy? Right.
Some patients are like, I don't have a lot of time. I'm like, well, you got to make time.
Yeah. You're like, well, we covered that objection a long time ago. Remember?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to schedule this appointment at an appropriate time. So you'll know for next time. But today, you're mine.
I warn patients, even most of the time during a movement assessment, I was like, when you get to this, like, get to the point of, like, because I kind of show them our whiteboard to kind of give them a little taste of, like, what it looks like. I was like, your goal is you need to plan for about an hour and a half, because in your first, like, few visits, like, the more exercises we do, the longer it's going to take. Because I have to sit there with you and we go through each and every individual step and I make sure that it's correct before I just let you go, because I'm not just going to, like, okay, I show you an exercise and I walk away. I'm like, especially with, like, the Turkish get up, anything to do with a kettlebell, I won't walk away from a patient unless I'm like, if I'm working with two different patients in two different kettlebell exercises, I'll put them simultaneously right next to each other so that way I can keep an eye on both of them. And most of the time, we have, like, a really good group of patients right now where I do, like, I do group exercises with them. So I'm like, okay, everyone's at the point where they need to learn the first 3 steps of the get up. So I'm like, okay, guys. And right now it's like it's like 3 or 4 guys that I'm like, okay, we all need to learn the get up. I'll show you.
Do it together. Yeah.
Yep. And then we all just do it together. And they find it entertaining. I find it entertaining because then, I'm able to correct each and every single one of them and I can sit and do. Because that way, if I can just get all 4 of them done and out of the way, I don't have to sit there because then I can just correct the ones as I see them. Like, okay, your shoulders need to be more square with your body. You need to roll your hips more.
Sure. And then as a group, people can learn off each other too.
Yep. And and it works because the guys love it. So
on that, let's kind of transition that into another topic. Tell us about, now, how did you get introduced to kettlebells in our clinic? And then why do you have this newfound proficiency for it? And just speak to that to everyone as far as about kettlebells and what you've learned and how you feel about them.
I've never worked with kettlebells until I walked into the office. I had gone to the gym, a handful of times, but I've always used barbells. I wasn't really well versed in it and how to use everything. And so when I started, dabbling with kettlebells, I hadn't really had much experience, so I had no idea what I was doing. So, David, Dr. Zach, Audrey both taught me, like, the safety of everything, as you as well. But, I was starting to learn everything, like, little bits and pieces here about them. And then this last August, I had the opportunity to go to one of Zara's class it's like a kettlebell 101. And so it was a 2-day class that one of my coworkers didn't end up going with me because she got sick. So I was like, can I just... Because we only signed up for 1 day. I didn't know I thought it was like you pay the first time and then it was like for both days. But we only paid for one. So I asked Zara if I could just use her credit and just come for the second day because I wanted to know more. The second day was really about, like, snatches and clean and presses. And I was like, I'm not so comfortable in teaching that stuff. Show me. I want to learn more. And so
just a quick timeout as far as Zara and this whole basis to give the background story on this. So Zara is a master Strong First kettlebell instructor, which is the highest level that you can be, second to Pavel, really Pavel and Brett Jones. Pavel's the very top, Brett Jones is second, and then master kettlebell instructor. I think there's only 8 of them worldwide. And so Zara is one of 8 that have this level. So it's very, very high up. He's been doing this a long time. Zara Horton, good buddy of mine from New Mexico. He got me into kettlebells. We talk about the whole story. We have I have an old podcast. I think it was like our 8th episode of a podcast where I did an interview with him at his gym in New Mexico. You have to go back and listen to that one.
Yeah. I will now. I didn't know that was there.
Yeah, back in the day. It was a long time ago. So Zara was always trying to get me into kettlebells when I was more geared towards bodybuilding, I would travel with Czar because he was a strength and conditioning coach for Jackson's Mixed Martial Arts. I was the team chiropractor. That's how he and I met. We were both working with Keith Jardine, the Dean of Mean, Keith Jardine, fighter. And we traveled to Vegas or something. Where did we travel? We went to Columbus, Ohio is where we went. We went to the Arnold. It was the same weekend as the Arnold Classic, which is a big bodybuilding show. And then me and Zara got to walk around the bodybuilding show and stuff and have fun with that. And anyway, we went to Keith's fight. He lost. Okay, bummer. But Zara and I had a good time. That's where we met, became friends. I never really did kettlebell training with him too much. I went to his gym a couple times out there. He had this big gym called Fire Bells because he's a firefighter as well.
Yeah.
And he's actually a paramedic, firefighter, EMT. He's technically a fire battalion chief, which is like pretty high up. Yeah. So he's in charge of like a whole department. So he's got like all the guys answer to him in the fire department. So he's pretty much like badass across the board and super high up in kettlebells. So he came out here to Boise to do a little kettlebell workshop, which he normally does workshops like at the Strong First. Strong First is the most prestigious kettlebell group in the world, in my strong opinion, but I don't think it's all that an opinion. I think it's fact. Czar is one of their highest level instructors. On these seminars that he normally teaches, there's like 200-300 people there usually. So it's very rare to be able to get a small group of people to be able to get that level of hands-on stuff with such a high level expert. So it's pretty cool. So he's coming here in town to do it at a buddy of mine's gym. And we had planned on sending a couple of our staff there. It was going to be Emily and another gal that ended up being sick. So anyway, Emily went. That's what she was just telling the story of. She went through the training, came back all jazzed up.
I came back very sore because let me tell you, if you like when they talk about form and keeping everything tight, they're not joking. Cause like I could feel like when I was like, if my core wasn't tight, I could feel it because I was starting to hurt. So I came back from day one. We had done swings for like 3 hours. It was like 9 to 2. I think it was a long day. So we'd done swings for like 3 hours. I was to the point where I just wanted to throw the kettlebell into the wall because I was like, swings are for me one of the hardest. They were one of the harder exercises to teach. But then when I took that class and Czar broke it down into like each individual like category with it, I was like, oh, this is easy. I was just making my life hard. And
which a side note too, here's a little bonus for everyone that's watching this. We have a program that we built called Move Well Kettlebell. It's a program that me and Trainer Tony built. Trainer Tony is one of the OGs back in the day for Move Now and for exercise therapists in our clinic, which we got some podcasts that we did with Danny and Trainer Tony sitting here. But so Trainer Tony and I built a thing called Move Well Kettlebell. The link is MW for Move Well. Used to be called Move Well, not Move Now. Okay, story behind that, but we'll tell it later. So mwkettlebell.com/swing. So if you type that in, you'll get a little red button there for free access to kettlebell fundamentals, which is the whole first part. Which have you ever looked at any of that stuff? Do we ever show you Move Well Kettlebell?
Probably in the beginning, but I haven't looked at it.
So like at this point, with now you having a really good reference, you should jump back into it again because now you'll understand a lot of the stuff and you'll pick up more little gems out of it. That'll help you.
That'll be my homework.
Yeah, that'll help you. So sorry, so I kind of cut you off. So basically you came back, you were super sore.
Yeah. So I came back, I did both. I ended up doing both days because the second day we were learning snatches and I really hadn't done a whole lot with snatches because it's one of the exercises we teach, but it's usually, that's like during our belt system, that's orange belt. And most of the time our patients by the 12-week transformation depending on how dysfunctional they are or functional, they're either a blue belt or a green belt by the time they walk away from us.
So time that out real quick. Remember, no one knows what you're talking about. So tell them what the belt system is.
So, I forget. So we have a belt system. So it goes white, yellow, blue, green, orange, black. So each belt has its own category of exercises and things that we do to get that belt. So in order to get, a white belt, we have to teach the fundamentals. So we teach them how to do their warm-ups, their postural correctives. We teach them the basics of diaphragmatic breathing, having a proper hip hinge. And the first thing when I'm teaching that exercise, I'm like, have you ever done a deadlift before? And if they tell me yes, I always like to see what they have been doing that I can correct. Because then I go in, I'm like, if they're doing like, oh, I do straight leg deadlifts. I'm like, we don't do that here. Here's A, how you're going to do a proper deadlift, and B, how you're going to, pick something off the ground, because that's the basis of how you should be bending down onto the ground and not using your back. And then we teach them how to keep their core tight. And so each belt has their own set of exercises. And so, I mean, I can go into that, but
So essentially there's a belt system, like she said, breathing, hip hinge, core, the basics. We teach them their warm up sequence.
Yep.
It gets assigned to them. They learn their postural corrective exercises. And then what else do they need to get to yellow belt?
Yellow-
Basically they have to do all the white belt stuff in all the dysfunctional
they have to do
categories.
all their white belt protocols in the first 2 dysfunctions. So usually, most of the time, it's like a D1, D2. And then the 2 big exercises that we teach are we break the Turkish get up because it's like an 8-step, 6. In our clinic, I teach 8 steps because there's few more.
What are the 2 more steps?
Yeah. What are the 2 more steps?
Yeah.
You do forearm, hand, leg, transferring. I think I add transferring the weight from.
Is this how Czar teaches it now?
Honestly, that was back in August.
Okay, gotcha.
It's
like constantly evolving.
Yeah, the way that he taught it, I think we worked from the top down, and so I teach it from the ground up.
Yeah.
And so the way that he was teaching me, I was like, "What are we doing?" But it like made sense that way. So I think there's just like a few, like I add, transferring, taking the weight from your hand, transferring it into a hip hinge, which he did teach, and then closing the door and then standing up. And so there's a few 6 or 8 steps depending on the patient. I can usually know if I'm going to end up going, if I can teach the first 3, the full get up with them, because the last part of the get up is being able to get from the ground up. So like getting from a lunging position to stand up. And so some patients can't do that because they don't have really good balance. So before we get to that point, we work on balance, and we work, there's been a few exercises that I don't do that are like I've had to ask David or you to get involved with, because I'm like, we need to correct this before I feel comfortable enough to teach them the rest of this. But
Gotcha. Okay.
first 3 steps of the get up, and then deadlifts are our yellow belt protocol.
That's to get to yellow belt?
That's to get the yellow belt. And then we
okay.
clear. The first thing I even do before we teach those exercises I clear their dysfunction. So like for me, I need to make sure that a patient, if they come into that dysfunction and pain, we're out of that pain stage with it, and that they are doing this exercise either, both here in the clinic and at home. And I can tell when a patient's doing their home care because they're excited to come do some new stuff. And then they'll always say something from like the videos. They're like, "Oh, I watched the videos at home." I'm like, "Great. So you know what we're doing today." Or like I could just see the improvement in them. So that way I'm like, okay, I feel like we're comfortable enough to do deadlifts or the first 3 steps that they get up. I'm like, and if me and a patient, we're struggling, I'm like, you're just really tight in this specific area, we're going to move on, but we're always going to come back and touch up on this. So,
and you can just ask a patient, you can say, how's your home care doing? And if, and if they go good, or could be better, or whatever.
If they hesitate, I already know that it's not good.
Or if you're making eye contact and they break eye contact, then you already know that something.
And I give them lectures every time. I'm like, better. They're like, I'm busy. I'm like, we're all busy, and yet we still we need to figure out. I'm like, one of the things when I was teaching home care to a traction patient too, I'm like, we can see when a patient is making progress because you're doing your home care at home, you're doing your traction at home, and you're not just like coming back here like in a bad mood, and like you come back in an like excited mood, wanting to learn new things.
Yeah, totally. Because in most cases, if you do what we have you do, you get better results, and it shows. All right. Well, hey, I know we could go longer, but I actually have to get over to this appointment. And
that was an hour?
We're hitting about an hour. And so I think we covered some great stuff. So I guess in a nutshell, just to round it up, round it out, if you look at Emily here, so Emily can run our whole exercise department. She could run our traction department. She could do a lot of other stuff. She could run the front desk. She could answer phones. She can do a little bit of everything, but she started with just the willingness to learn. Okay. And she's taken that, we've given her the resources, she's learned, she's become really, really great in this, extremely proficient. And it's because she's following systems. So 1, you got to find the right people, like someone like Emily, but 2, you got to have systems to put in place. We have systems, we have the guidance. And the cool thing is, even in Move Now University, like you come out to an impact event, your team can interact with Emily one-on-one. If you really wanted to, and you're a member of Move Now University, we could connect you in little group Marco Polo, and
Yeah.
and Emily can reach out and help you out with stuff.
I can't tell you how many times Danny was like, "Hey, this doctor has some FM questions. I'm going to send them to you." I'm like, "Okay, bring it on."
No, totally. So anyway, with that said, thank you for coming over and
Thanks for having me.
and rapping with us. And any closing words of wisdom in 20 seconds or less?
That was a fun unscripted podcast.
Cool. Awesome. Well, here's some links that you got to listen to. Check out our demo, 30-minute pre-recorded demo.movenowyou.com. If you have not already, it'll be repeated in the outro. We'll see you on the next one. Want more Move Now secrets? If so, then go get your copy of my best-selling book and watch my 30-minute behind-the-scenes Move Now demo. My book is called Move Well Secrets, and you can get your free copy at book.movenowyou.com. And watch the 30-minute demo of our exclusive doctor training portal at demo.movenowyou.com. With these two resources, you'll find my top 22 secrets that we've used to build one of the smoothest running, results producing, and super profitable exercise departments within a chiropractic clinic in the entire profession.